guys who experienced that, so let's pay attention. And then afterwards, you can run around and throw stuff at me. Yeah! Rob Haslam. I forget whose music stand this is, but it's okay with you. I'm just going to go ahead and use it. Nick, right?
Yeah, Nick.
I got your name right?
Yeah, that's right.
Sweet. I usually suck at names really bad, which meant that anyone who came into the bunker, if you ever, or actually anywhere else, if you hear me and go, hey bud, how you doing? It's because I have no clue what your name is. And I just call everyone Bud, which is fair, because there's a lot of buds in the world. Actually, it's really funny. When we moved out of Winnipeg, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, I actually met a guy whose name was Badillion. Serious, true story. Guy's name was Badillion. Everyone called him Buddy, and he lives in town now. I don't know if you follow me, it's kind of creepy. But yeah, his name is Badillion. And I think he's a teacher in town now or something. He's a Kaler, whatever the case.
Bud Kaler?
Bud Kaler?
His name's Badillion?
His name is Badillion.
What?
Yeah. It's probably one of the most awesome experiences of my life, right there.
That's unreal.
I don't know how to top it. It's Badillion. You ever meet a Badillion? Yeah. That sounds weird. Say that way. You gotta say that right. You ever meet a Badillion? It's like you're speaking another language. It's kind of cool. Anyway, my name is Rob. As Jeff already mentioned, I'm gonna give you a little bit about my background and how I kind of, some of the life lessons I learned, and specifically as it relates to things like relationships. Because when I was in high school, my hobby was dating. And anybody got that hobby? Yeah? No? See? No? Okay, because you know, no, can you stand up and look at everyone? This would be really cool. Because Jeff already indicated we embarrass people. Guys, take a look at Noah. Yeah, right? You know what we called that when I was younger? Man pretty. It was man pretty. You know, because I can't tell you you're attractive, because that's just weird. But you're man pretty. Right? How you feel? She feels great. See? That's good. Let's do it in a moment. It's good. So, I want to tell you a little bit of just a couple of life lessons I learned growing up, and maybe some will apply to you, maybe it won't. But I'm hoping it really does. My name is Rob, of course, I already mentioned that. We are landed immigrants here in Canada as a family. You guys know what a landed immigrant is? Anyone? Yes, you married one now. A landed immigrant is a person who's from another country. They move, let's say, to Canada, and you're allowed to do everything a Canadian is allowed to do except vote. So I'm allowed to pay taxes. I'm allowed to, you know, get charged for things. But I'm just not allowed to vote. So we moved into the north end of Winnipeg. That's where I primarily grew up. Lived on a street called Alfred. I don't know if you guys know anything about Winnipeg or not, but Alfred was pretty interesting. I remember our first night there. I woke up to my older brother screaming. He was like legs up in the air screaming, sitting on my bed because there was a rat that would just climb up out of the register. This is ginormous thing. Of course, I was 5 years old, so everything when you're 5 is ginormous, right? And this thing is dead in the middle of the floor, and he's just screaming, and I'm like, this is awesome. So I went, picked it up and threw it at him. Because that's what you do as brothers, right? Like, you want to help them get over their fear. I was trying to help them. And so we lived in this area. We were absolutely poor. Absolutely poor. We lived in low-income housing. We were on social assistance, like welfare, when we first came to Canada. My dad finally got a job, and he still works there at Motor Coach Industries, building buses. And it was tough. Because when you grow up in the north end of Winnipeg, it's a different world than it is here. I'll give you an example of what I mean. I grew up in a very alcoholic, abusive home. Dad was an alcoholic, he was a military man, and he carried with him a lot of anger from his own childhood, because he grew up in an alcoholic, abusive home. And the thing is that every one of my friends was in an alcoholic, abusive home. So we had no idea we were being abused, because we all had exactly the same experiences. We called it discipline. And so we were just getting so, we just didn't understand people that didn't have that background. Does that make sense? Like, their world didn't make sense to us. When I moved here to Winkler, and I was talking to my wife is a funny lady. She thought you could get pregnant by just sitting in a hot tub. When she was 16 years old. I know some of you are like, you can't? No. Go back to school. Okay, so her group of friends were super innocent and just didn't really understand much about life outside of that. And so things that she was learning later on in high school, we knew in elementary school and things like that. And so we just didn't relate to people who weren't from our area. And we had a really difficult time relating to anybody who came from a loving home. And because of that, all of us tried to figure out ways to gain love in life in a different way. Every single one of us. And so we were up, and we were always like chasing girls, literally, because when you're younger, that's what you do. Chase the girls you like, and you throw things at them and stuff, right? Still? Okay. And those are the kinds of things you do, but as you're getting older, you start getting sweet on people, and you start dating. I was a guy that nobody should have dated. Growing up. I grew up it was a non-Christian home. I didn't become a Christian until later in my teen years. And so we moved out of North End, Winnipeg. My family finally got enough money to get a down payment for a house. And this was in the late 80s. And so we finally got enough money to get a down payment on a house. And so we moved out of North End, Winnipeg. We moved to a community called Landmark, Manitoba. You ever hear of it? Yeah. We were one of the very first non-Christian families they had ever seen. They didn't know what to do with us. Like, I'll give you an example. We celebrated Halloween. We were the only ones. We went house to house. They didn't have candy. It was weird. And nothing. They just stared at us like we were doing something wrong. Kids weren't allowed to be our friends. You know, I remember my first day of school going there, and the teacher, like the principal, sat my brother and I down. My brother and I, we have two younger sisters, but he sat my brother and I down, and he said, I know if I have problems in this school, it's going to be your fault. That was my first day of school. And he was true to his word. Something went wrong. Some girl had $50 go missing out of her locker, and we were immediately called down into the office, and it was our fault. Of course, we hadn't taken it. She just happened to find it later on in her gym bag, but we never got an apology. Because if it had gone missing, it would have been our fault anyway. You know, so it's just, growing up, we didn't experience love at home. We experienced a lot of hurt at home. We move out of the community, we thought we'd get a fresh start. We're told on the first date at school that we're bad. That we were just bad. I didn't grow up being able to play hockey or anything like that. We couldn't afford it. And so then the way I tried to maybe fit in with everyone was trying to go play hockey. Well, I was an ankle breaker. You guys know what that is? Yeah, you know what I mean? It's a guy who doesn't know how to skate, and so when they skate, they're literally, like, it looks like they're breaking their ankles like this on the ice. You ever see that happen? Yeah. Well, my first year playing hockey was Pee Wee. How many of you know that Pee Wee is your first year hitting? So I got hit from behind, and I went flying into the boards, and I kicked myself in the back of the head. I was so angry. So I got up, and my team is yelling, fight. Now, I was never told the rules of hockey. I didn't know anything about hockey. I didn't know that there was a fighting etiquette in hockey. When I was playing hockey, that was the years that you were still allowed to pull the shirt over a guy's head and pound on him. I didn't even know that you could do that. So they're yelling fight. Here's this guy who could skate circles around me so easily. I'm fresh out of the North End of Winnipeg. People are yelling fight. And when you're North End of Winnipeg, when someone yells fight, if you're at a disadvantage, you even the playing field. So this guy drops his helmet, drops his gloves, and starts trying to fight me. So I drop my gloves, I grab my helmet, and start beating him with it. Because I'd even the playing field. My entire team was so mad at me that they wanted me kicked off the team. So I felt rejection there. Obviously, right? And then something really horrible happened. The bank took our house. I was in grade 8. We couldn't afford the payments on the house, and the bank foreclosed on our house, and we were kicked out. And we had to move. So we moved to this place called Greenland. And I don't mean the country. It's a colony. And it was a Haldimand colony. So here we are, a non-Christian family, and we move into this Haldimand. Do you know what a Haldimand is? Anybody? No? Do you know what Hutterite is? Okay, it's the same idea. Okay, very, very similar idea. And so we move into the middle of this colony, and we had a crazy first night there. Our first night there, my mom is, like, we're from Spain, and my mom is ridiculously superstitious, okay? And anybody knows anything about Latin culture, you'll know that people are superstitious, right? Gabriel? Right? I called you all, man. People are seriously superstitious. And so our first night there, we're all of a sudden, it's dark, it's late, and we're hearing these weird guttural noises upstairs in the house. And my mom is freaking out. She thinks there's some kind of demonic thing happening in the house. And she's running around the house, and she's lighting candles everywhere to ward off the demons. And isn't that my dad's marching around the house, just dropping F-bombs everywhere, wondering who's in our house, and he wants to get a hold of them. And finally, my brother and I realize where the sounds are coming from, and there's this speaker on the wall. And this Haldimand church is pumping their High German services into our house. And of course, we thought it was just some demonic thing happening, because none of us knew anything about German. It was a weird thing. A very weird thing. That was the first night there. The first day at school, I finally experienced my first time feeling accepted by somebody. The principal sat me down. My brother and I, he sat us down individually. And so when he sat me down, he puts this folder on his desk, and he says, well, I've read your file. Okay, great, here we go again, right? Because I want you to know that here, you start with a clean slate. And it's like I got this chance, right? I got this chance to be known and be identified and defined as being somebody different. Not based on who I used to be, right? And it's just started a great relationship with him. But then I started dating. And as a guy who sought acceptance from people, who sought love from people, I was a guy who, I didn't date anyone because I actually wanted to date. I was dating people so that I would feel worthwhile, if that's a good way to say it. So I tried to see how many people I could date. Yeah, like I was one of the guys who, me and my group of buddies, we had dibs on girls. Is that terrible? I know, no. Sorry, see, man, pretty guys don't do that, right? We had dibs on girls. And we got really offended if one of the guys went after the girl that you had dibs on. I know, it was terrible. And so we were just dating people and dating people and dating people. And finally, at one point, I had this group of friends that saw that my life was just not something they really wanted much to do with. Pastor's kid ended up being one of my closest friends. I was a horrible influence on him. Here's this pastor's kid, he grew up, and it's just this wonderful, loving home, and like I said, he's hanging out with me, and his parents, start to wonder why he's dropping F-bombs, and why he's looking at dirty magazines, and all these other kinds of things, and so they didn't really want him to spend time with me at all. He did anyway, because I told him to. It's just the way it works. And so this group of friends that kind of welcomed me in, these Christian kids, really, I thought they were idiots. I did. Because you're praying to some invisible entity somewhere up in the sky, and you're expecting some kind of answer. None of it made sense. There's no logic to it, anything like that. Finally, they said, they were answering a lot of questions for me, and just wrestling a lot of debating back and forth, and they finally invited me to come to a camp with them. This is how they got me to go to camp. You ready? They said there's going to be girls, late nights, fire, because if you want a guy to do anything, you either tell him there's going to be fire or something's going to blow up, and he'll be there. Okay? So there was going to be these firesides and that kind of stuff. And I thought, hey, this is great. We get to water ski. This is going to be a great time. So I go. And what they didn't tell me was about this thing called chapel. I didn't even know what it was. And they did this weird thing there. You sat down in chapel. It was the first night we arrived, and I'm like, this is great. We're going to have this fire. It's going to be loud. We're going to stay up late. It's going to be awesome. And they said, all right, guys, unload your stuff, get in the cabins, and get off to chapel. It's like, what is chapel? So we get into this thing called chapel, and he had these like wooden pews to sit on, super uncomfortable. And the guy goes up front, kind of like Jeff did here, introduce himself, introduce what was happening over the course of the weekend, and then he yells this, swords up. Swords, what's wrong with you? You guys know what I'm saying when I say swords up? See, some of you, yes, some of you know. For those of you who don't know, then you're like me, you're thinking everyone else is an idiot, right? Swords up, what they did was they raised their Bibles up in the air. And this guy called out a Bible reference, and then they all yelled the Bible reference back at him, and he yelled, sword down, and then they would put their swords down, and they're rifling through these Bible passages, trying to find it up, and the first one to get it stands up, reads it out, and he wins. I don't do that anymore. and it was just the weirdest thing ever. And then they did praise and worship. And then some people are singing songs that I've never heard before. And back then we didn't have projectors because projectors didn't exist. And you need to know that I was in high school before the internet. I'm old. I said tomorrow I will be dust. And so there was no projectors or anything else. Again, I didn't know what the songs were. People are singing, they're having a blast. The speaker goes on. The speaker does something weird. He brings a casket, like a coffin, onto the stage. And then he says, because he did a really compelling talk, and he was moving, and he was talking about how all of us are broken, and all of us have this thing called sin in our lives, and this is something that God doesn't want for us. He wants a right relationship with us, and so then we are to confess our sin to Him and ask for forgiveness and come in a relationship with Him, is what this guy was saying. But he said it in a way that was really powerful, and it moved me. And then he says, okay, now everyone, there's a piece of paper being handed out. I want you to write down a sin and come forward and throw it in the coffin. And the way he defined sin, I was like, can I just jump in the coffin already? Because the way you're defining, this is just my life, this is who I am. And so I wrote one down. I was one of the pallbearers, and we brought this thing in. It was ridiculously light when we brought it in, but he called us to take it out. And when we tried to lift this thing, it was actually really heavy. And I don't know if that was all just in our head, or if there was something more happening there, but it was ridiculously heavy, and we took it out to this cliff, and we wrapped it in these trucker chains. And you guys know what I'm talking about, those really thick, awesome chains, and we wrapped it up and threw it in the lake of the woods, and it sank to the bottom. And he said that's kind of what happens with our sin when God takes it. It's like He buries it. We don't have to deal with it anymore. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it was an amazing thing to me because I had never heard anything like that before. So we go back to our cabins at the end of the evening, and I'm having a tough night because I'm dealing with the, for lack of better ways of saying, I'm dealing with the emotions of being a kid who comes from an abusive home, being a kid who never felt love, and being told now that there's this loving Father in heaven who wants absolute relationship with me and will forgive absolutely everything I've ever done in my life. And it was tough for me to handle. So I walk down to the dock, past curfew, which no good Christian kid ever did. And so they were all worried back in the cabin. Our cabin counselor comes out, he sits down with me in the dock, and he says, what's going on? So I just started telling him what's going on in my life. And then he asked me if I wanted Jesus to kind of help me work through that. And so that night, I accepted Jesus, and it was amazing. And then we walked back up to the cabin, and as we go into the cabin, I looked at the guys, and they're all like wondering, did I get in trouble? What's happening? Because there's douchey kids. And I said, well, you know how everyone in the room here is a Christian? They go, yeah. And I said, well, you can add another one too. And I've never heard high school boys sound like little girls screaming so much in my life. It was a little uncomfortable. That night, going to sleep, was probably one of the worst nights I'd ever had. It was probably one of the worst nights I'd ever had. I couldn't sleep. And all these incredibly dark images coming into my head. And just couldn't sleep. The next morning, all the cabinet counselors, they'd all had their meeting ahead of time. I didn't even know this. I was the only non-Christian kid at the camp. So it's like everyone was just zoned in on me, you know, and just, we're gonna get him. We're like this project kid, right? Like, we're gonna get you. So they all knew about it. We go off to chapel, and everyone is excited from their cabins because the non-Christian kid became a Christian, and this is an awesome thing. And so everybody's praising and worshiping, and then I did something wrong. It was my first sin, I guess, as a new Christian. The speaker started yelling out to everyone, okay, everyone, just start yelling out praises to God. Now, I had what you would affectionately call a potty mouth. At the time, I wasn't delivered of a potty mouth. And so here are all these people that are yelling, thank you, Lord, this, and this, and this, and this, and it's all going great. And I yell out, kid you not, top of my lungs, and got the room dead silent. I yelled, F-A, God! I don't recommend doing that during any worship service. Everyone just stopped dead. And they just turned to me and looked at me, and then, you know, after a while they carried on afterwards, and then afterwards I come outside, and I had this group of students come up to me, and they did exactly this. They said, you know, Christians don't do that. I was like, okay, great. So now I'm not even a good Christian. I'm a low-income kid. My parents don't really want me. My mom used to kick us out at 9 o'clock in the morning and tell us not to come back till supper. So I wasn't wanted at home. I wasn't wanted in school. Parents wouldn't let their kids hang with me. And now I finally, quote unquote, fit in because I was this new Christian kid. I was a bad one. I was just rejected again. And it was tough. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try and figure this thing out. But the part that I wasn't able to figure out was, how do I deal with my absolute need for love? To feel loved, to feel valuable, to feel as though I mattered and that I was wanted by people. And so I just continued dating. And I dated a lot. And it was bad. And, you know, I remember times when we were sitting down in the cafeteria in high school, and I looked over at my buddies and said, hey, should I go ask her out? Didn't even know who she was. Should I go ask her out? Yeah, do that, go. That's how we do that, right? So I went and asked her out and said, hey, you want to go out with me? And back then, what that meant was, if you're going to ask somebody out, that meant that you're now dating. Hey, you want to go with me? Yeah, sure, it'd be great. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, good. See you later. Went back and sat down with the guys. One of the guys looks at me. Dude, what? It's my sister. I didn't think she'd say yes. And I broke up with her 3 days later. The way I normally would have. I would insult her. Because she would say, well, why are you breaking up with me? I said, oh, you have a hump on your back. I can't look at you. The worst point that I ever got was dating multiple girls at the same time. And one of them, gave me a call one day. She said, I was at the doctor's. And they took a biopsy on my back. They said it's cancer. And I broke up with her. Not funny anymore, is it? See, I was toxic. The way I treated people was horrible. My desire to feel loved, I didn't care about loving anyone else. I was a toxic person. And I wonder how many of us have either been in or are in toxic relationships. You know, those relationships that just rob us of something. They take from us, they take life from us, they make us miserable in a variety of ways. Or maybe we're toxic people and we just don't realize it yet. And maybe you would say to yourself, I would never tell a girl that I'm breaking up with her because she's got cancer. I could be. Maybe you're a better person than I was. But I was absolutely toxic. I want to talk to you a little bit about avoiding toxic relationships. You see, I had a guy take me aside. He was my youth pastor at the time. He's a lead pastor somewhere now. But he took me aside, and instead of just pointing fingers at me and judging me and saying you suck and you're being horrible to people, he heard about this breaking up with a girl because she had cancer. She survived, by the way. We ended up actually, my wife and I got married and joined another church. We ended up being in the same Bible study group. That was weird. Previous to that, I had contacted her and apologized for being a jerk. I want to talk to you a little bit about what happens when we recognize that we are in or we are toxic to people. We're in a toxic relationship or we are toxic people. You see, if that is where we're at, or if that's the kind of relationship we're in, then we need to understand that there's an opposite option for us. There's an absolute opposite option for us. And that opposite option, I want to suggest to you, is that there is a way to do relationship that God intends us to do. And in a way that would honor Him, that would honor ourselves, and would honor the people that we're with. Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2 says this. Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. You see, I believe that needs to be a bit of a premise for us in life. If we were to live our lives in such a way that it's an act of worship to God, then everything it is that we do, whether we eat, sleep, breathe, doesn't matter what it is, and we will choose to glorify God in it. Because it's an act of worship. And if that's our premise, then I think what we need to understand is that if we're going to be in relationship with people, then we need to focus first, I think, on our relationship with the Lord. We need to learn what it means to love God. And to grow in that love of God. And just a couple of pointers here for you is, one of the ways that you learn to love God is that we submit to His plan. You see, God does actually have a plan for us. It may not make sense to us at first. We may not understand what it is at this point. But He actually does have a plan for us. In Luke chapter 22, verse 42. And it is an example of a conversation Jesus was having in the garden with God the Father. He says this, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. And the cup He's talking about is dying. A gruesome death. And being brutalized by Roman soldiers with whips. He says, if you are willing, take this cup from me. And then He says this, not my will, your will be done. Submit to His plan. And I think often, when I was youth pastoring, I used to youth pastor in Winker here before I was running the bunker. Even while I was running the bunker, I would have people say to me things like, hey, man, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing here. Or I don't know what I should do here. Or, I know what God wants me to do, but I just don't really want to do it. How many of you have been like this? I know what God wants from me, but I just don't want to do it. Is that you? I've been like that. There are lots of times God has wanted me to do things that I just didn't want to. And one of the ways that we walk forward into this relationship with God in terms of loving Him is that we submit to His plan. Here's an example of what I mean. Janet and I, my wife Janet and I, we had celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary 9 years ago. We went to Toronto. I was going to a conference, for a youth ministry conference, and so we went there a little bit early. I took Janet back to the airport, and then I went back because I was going to head back to the hotel for the conference. And as I was coming back, I took the subway back, and I came up onto Yonge Street. You guys know anything about Yonge Street? Yonge Street would be kind of like our North Main. Okay, so it's a bit of a rougher area. There's a lot of homeless guys around and stuff like that. And so I came up out of the subway and I see this guy sitting on the curb. And the immediate thought was, Rob, you need to go sit down with this guy and eat with him. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. It's January. I have no interest in sitting on a curb, eating with a homeless guy. I didn't want to. But as I got closer, because I had to cross the street right by where he was, I felt compelled like I have to do this. So here's what I did. I looked at him and said, "Hey man, you hungry?" Obvious answer, yes. So I went to the pizza restaurant that was right behind me, grabbed a medium pizza, came outside, had a couple of hot chocolates, sat down with him and said, "Hey, here's a hot chocolate. I want to sit and eat with you." He looked at me and just cussed me out. He's like, "Get the F out of here," you know. It's like, "No, it's okay, man. I'm just going to sit with you. What's your name?" So he tells me his name. I say, "Can you tell me your story?" So here's this guy's story. He ended up on the streets in Toronto, having come from Vancouver. He just got out of prison. He served a 21-year sentence for prostitution, for prostituting young girls, because he was part of a gang, and for drug trafficking and all kinds of stuff. And he came out to the streets of Toronto. And everything he had talked about, this guy was not a good human being, quote unquote. And he said while he was in prison, he was interesting. He goes, "Man," he says, "you gotta meet this guy that I met when I was in prison." I was like, "Oh, who'd you meet when you were in prison?" He says, "You're never gonna believe it." I said, "Okay, tell me." He goes, "Well, when I was in prison, I met this awesome guy, and his name was Jesus effing Christ." Because he still had potty mouth. And he was all excited about having met Jesus. I was like, "Oh, really?" So he started talking more about it, and he goes, "This guy can forgive every one of your effing sins. You don't have to be an a-hole anymore." And all these other guys. He's just going on and on. He's preaching to me about how I need Jesus in my life. I learned something there. You know, I learned that I need to be more humble. I need to exercise more humility in dealing with people. But that never would have happened had I not submitted to God's plan for me that day. And one of the ways you show love for God is that you submit to His plan. I also think another big one is that we need to learn to love ourselves. I hated myself. I couldn't stand being alone. I hated being alone, but I just couldn't handle it. I always had to have people around me all the time, because if I was alone with my thoughts, then I would just think about how horrible a person I was. And I think it's really important that the key thing in terms of our relationships and not being toxic people anymore is that we need to learn to love ourselves. And my premise for that is this. I don't believe that the God of creation, the God of the universe, the God who can do absolutely anything, makes mistakes. I don't believe He makes mistakes. In Scriptures it tells us that He knit us together in our mother's wombs. And then it also says in Genesis 1:27, it says, "So God created mankind," listen to this, "in His own image. In the image of God He created them. Male and female He created them." And so we are created in the image of God. And every single time I would hate on myself, every single time I would say to myself that I wasn't valuable, I wasn't worthy, I was saying that I wasn't who I really was. I was an image bearer. I am an image bearer. And as a person who bears the image of God, I deserve love, acceptance. I deserve relationship with people. So we need to love ourselves. And in loving ourselves, one of the things we have to come to face with the lies that we believe about ourselves. There's some videos that have been going on crazy on YouTube and Facebook and all that kind of stuff for a number of years already. But it's just these women who feel horrible about themselves, and this videographer videotapes a lot of people who know them and who say just incredible things about them. And then they get them into a mall, and they go to this video booth, and they see this thing, and they just break down. Because they believe a lot of lies about themselves. And we are people who believe a lot of lies. We believe that we're not valuable. Some of us in the room here might believe that we're dumb. Some of us here might believe that we're ugly. You're not ugly, you're just uniquely attractive. Some of you will catch that tomorrow. Some of us believe that we're not able to be forgiven for our past. Some of us believe that we're not valuable enough to spend time with. And some of us believe that this is all that life is. There's nothing more to it. We believe a lot of lies about ourselves, and these lies that we take on, they beat us up. They wreck us. And these lies come from the pit. You know, Scripture tells us that the devil is the father of lies, and every single lie that he tells is intended to wreck us. Every lie that he tells is intended to destroy us, really, because he hates us. He absolutely hates us. And so he plants these thoughts into our head. You're not worth it. You're not loved. You're ugly. You're dumb. Nobody wants to be near you. Your friends don't actually like you. You don't have friends. Your parents hate you. They don't want you around. See, all those thoughts that we keep in our heads, these are lies from the devil. And the only way you're going to counteract those lies is with truth. And the truth is, you bear the image of God. The truth is that He created you with His hands. He fashioned you together. The truth is that He loved you so much that He died for you, and if God is willing to come down to earth and die for us, then that must mean that there's something valuable about who we are. So it's not that you are not valuable. The truth is that you are most valuable because God was willing to die for you. You're worth it. You matter. We need to get to this place where we begin to love ourselves. The last one would be when we do that, then we're actually able to love other people. And we're able to treat them with honor and dignity and respect. You know, Jesus actually said in Matthew 22, verse 36 to 40, He says, Teacher, or He was asked this question, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength. And this is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the laws of the prophets hang on these two commandments. So what's He saying? He's saying, love God, love others, and love yourself. Right? He's saying, love others as you love yourself. And loving others as you love yourself means this. You walk into a room and you immediately, rather than looking at a person as if there's something wrong with them, you look at them and you say, this person is an image bearer and they are worthy of respect. They are worthy of honor. They are worthy of dignity. And we'll treat them accordingly. When we're in relationships with people, then imagine this. Here's a shock. Imagine actually being in a dating relationship, for example, where you were treated with tremendous amount of respect, honor, and dignity. Let me offer this to you. If you're in a dating relationship and those things aren't happening, then get out. Just get out. Because at the end of the day, that's going to hurt you. It's just going to hurt you. It's going to rip you up. It's going to rip you apart. It's toxic. And we're never intended to be in toxic relationships. We're intended to be in a relationship that builds us up. Where we learn more about who we are as we stand before God and as we stand before others. We learn to be people who live with dignity, live with honor, live with respect. And we offer that to everyone else around us. I couldn't think of a better way to be in relationship with people. And so even for me, for example, as a pastor, I often tell people, and I say this over and over and over again, I really don't care what it is you have ever done in your life. I don't care. What I care about is how it's impacted me. See, because I don't believe that there's anything we can do that we can't be forgiven for. So if that's the point, if that's the case, then what you've done isn't the point. How it impacts you, that's the point. And the only way I'm able to do that is to be able to see every single person in the room here as a person who bears the image of God. As a person who needs to be respected, needs to be honored, needs to be treated with dignity, needs to be treated as if your voice matters, and who you are as a person matters. And when you're in relationships that do that, then all of a sudden you're in something that's going to bring you life. You're in something that's going to make you feel amazing about yourself rather than worse about yourself. You're in something that's going to help you grow as a person rather than destroy you. I finally figured that out when I graduated from high school. So I ended up phoning every single one of my ex-girlfriends and apologized. Apologized to every single one of them. I remember exactly what I did to every single one of them. And I apologized. Because I recognized that I didn't treat them with dignity. I didn't treat them with honor. I didn't treat them as if they were an image bearer. I didn't treat them as if they were worthy of respect and honor and dignity. So I apologized. And then the rest of my life, because I'm 40 years old now, has been about being a person who will honor others and will see them the way God sees them. You see, when God looks at you, you need to know that when you accept Jesus Christ, He looks at you through the lens of His Son. Okay? The Scripture tells us that Christ's righteousness has been given to us, and that's how God looks at us, which means He sees you as perfect, as His child that is loved and wanted. That's the kind of relationship that I want everyone to experience when they experience me. So here's the question for you, and I'll leave you with this. Anyone who's in any kind of relationship with you, what do they experience? Do they experience honor, dignity, respect? And if not, is there something that you can be doing in your life that can move you in that direction? The other question is this. If you're in a relationship with somebody, whether it's a friendship or a dating relationship, and it's just bringing you down because you're not being treated with dignity, honor, and respect, why are you staying in it? Why are you staying in that relationship? Why not move away from it so that you can experience something better? So those are the two things I want to leave with you. And I'm just going to close the word of prayer, and then I'm going to ask, I guess the worship team is going to come back up. Is that right? Or no?
Yep.
Yes? Okay, no, it's good. All right, well, let's pray. Lord God, I thank you so much for tonight, and I thank you that you were God and we are not. Because, Lord, if we were God, things would just get messy. So thank you that you're God and we're not. I thank you that there's absolutely nothing we can do to make you love us more, and nothing that we have done or will do that will make you love us less. I thank you that you're present in all spaces and all times, and that wherever you are, there's always an opportunity for hope, forgiveness, love, and acceptance. So, Lord God, as we're moving forward, would you help us to be a people that honor you in all of our relationships? That we would grow in our understanding of love for you. That we would grow in a deepening understanding of who we are as you've created us. Learn to actually love ourselves. And Lord, that we would also then be a people that will love others as you have called us to. In your name I pray. Amen. Thanks, guys.